Hi, Emma. Welcome to the Genetic Genius podcast. I'm so excited to have you as a guest today.
Hi, thank you so much for having me, Lulu. I'm excited to be here.
Yay! I'm excited for us to talk all about creating a toxin free home. But before we kind of dive in, I'd love for you to just introduce yourself to the listeners, talk about what you do, your passion, and of course, your impact on the planet because you're creating, I love with your green dream, so to speak.
Yeah, so I am a mom of two. I've got a 9-year-old and a 6-year-old, and I'm an environmental engineer by education. So my journey through this whole process actually started as a university student when I was learning how to design water treatment plants. Don't ask me to
Mm.
do it now because I haven't done it since, but I learned what we were putting into our water and what our municipal systems actually could not remove. And I stopped using conventional cleaners cold turkey at that point. I used to be normal, quote unquote, as I as I say. And that really got me thinking about things in my home in a different way.
Mm.
And so I was kind of chipping away at things slowly even as a student. And when I had my kids, it started to put my interest into overdrive. So many people start thinking about this after their kids are born. And I guess I was in a similar boat because I thought that I was eating organic. I had switched over a bunch of my house products and my personal care products but I didn't really do a lot of digging into why. And when I had my second child, I started to wonder if any of this really mattered. There was more talk about toxins at that point than when I started. And it was from both sides. So there was a lot of messaging like, oh, it's just in small amounts. It doesn't matter. Don't worry about
Mm.
it. And then there was a lot of also very alarmist messaging saying, your shampoo is going to kill you. And
Right.
so,
The extremes there, huh?
yeah, totally. And my brain doesn't work in extremes.
Hmm.
I like the very balanced, fact-based. I'm
Hmm.
very analytical and science oriented. And so I decided to research for my own family whether what we were doing was worthwhile. And I wanted to find out that I could stop. That was kind
Mm.
of my
Mm.
secret hidden agenda.
Right.
Because we're here right now, you can probably guess that that didn't happen.
Right. That didn't
Yeah.
happen.
And it propelled me on a trajectory. I should say at the time I was on maternity leave from my career. So after university, I entered into a career in green building consulting. So
Mm-hmm.
I then developed an appreciation for what our indoor environments were doing to our health. And so combining kind of my schooling education and my career and then adopting things at home and really digging into what was going on with my kids, I created the Green at Home blog. And from there, it just kind of snowballed. I realized that
Mm-hmm.
other people needed this information as well. And I started really getting into the health side of things more and more. And yeah, that's where I'm at today.
Wow, that's great, Emma. I really love what you're doing. And you have so many great resources, which we're going to talk about today, too. And your website is amazing for that because I think, it's great to go to one place where the information is true. Like you're saying, there's so much different data out there. And it's just you're giving so much great information to the public. So,
Thank
yay.
you.
Totally. Okay, can we kind of like start at so you told a little bit about your story, which is great. And I'd love for us to like start about the basics in the home, just like, what types of things can be toxic?
And this is where I think it causes people to shut down a little bit
Right. Yeah.
because
Maybe like we don't want to send people into the shutdown fear mode, but also I think awareness is really key because there is a lot of things. I myself know that because I have a green home and it takes work, but once you get into the rhythm, which I know that you're going to talk about, I don't want to spoil anything, but anyway, yeah. Okay, go.
yeah, so the problem is, and I think it's a problem and a good thing, is that toxins are everywhere. And I say it's a good thing because it means that there are lots of opportunities for improvement.
Right.
And so I like to break it down in terms of exposure pathways. So you can
Mm-hmm.
think of the things that you are ingesting. So you're eating and drinking, what you're inhaling,
Mm-hmm.
and what you're absorbing through your skin.
Mm-hmm.
And so if we kind of clump it into those pathways, a few examples would be for ingestion, obviously what you're eating and what you're drinking. So food and
Mm-hmm.
water are so important. And when with food, a lot of people think of, they look at the macronutrients and the ingredient
Right.
labels and call it a day. But there's a lot of ingredients that aren't necessarily on food labels.
Right. Yeah. With
So that's
FDA.
looking, yeah, looking at pesticides and also packaging and how that can lend some plasticizers, some BPA to your food.
Mm-hmm.
Your water is technically safe in North America. Most of us have water that we can drink out of the tap without getting sick. But as
Mm-hmm.
I mentioned before,
Mm-hmm.
there are a lot of things that drinking water treatment plants cannot remove. And if you are on a well, it is entirely up to you to
Yeah.
treat that water yourself. And with water and food, some of the surprising toxins that we're exposed to are persistent environmental pollutants. So they're things
Mm-hmm.
that aren't necessarily intentionally put in there, but over the generation since the Second World War, when chemicals started to be used in more commonplace, they have built up in our soil.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're exposed to these things if we're not mindful about it through our food and water.
Right. Yeah.
So that's ingestion. Inhalation is everything you're breathing in. And so a
Mm.
lot of people think of outdoor air pollution,
Right.
but studies show that indoor air quality can actually be 2 to 5 times worse than outdoors.
Because we're in a smaller environment. Mm-hmm.
Because especially if you're in a climate where you're closed up more, either because it's really hot and you've got AC running, or it's
Mm-hmm.
really cold and you've got the heat on, all of the building materials, your furniture, your
Mm-hmm.
cleaners, your skincare products, all of these things build up in the air. And
Mm-hmm.
especially now, more people have been at home for longer periods,
Just a little
and
bit.
all of these things kind of build up in your home.
Mm-hmm.
And household dust has actually been shown to contain quite high concentrations of things like flame retardants and phthalates that
Mm-hmm.
settle out of the products that we use on a daily basis. And cleaning products and personal care products, obviously, you're breathing those in as you're using them. And then the final bucket is absorption. And so there are memes and different things out there that say everything you put on your skin gets absorbed in 26 seconds and goes straight to your bloodstream and all that. Though that's not actually true. However, we do know that the skin is a barrier for some things, but not everything.
Mm-hmm.
And research has shown that the products that we put on our skin does get absorbed. And there are some ingredients that actually make the skin more permeable,
We'll remember as we go along.
but they increase the absorption of certain chemicals that may not have otherwise passed
Mm-hmm.
through. So yeah, those are kind of the pathways that I like to think about
Mm-hmm.
when approaching your home, because things are everywhere. It's important to look at your home specifically and where you are most likely to be exposed to toxins that are most important to you.
Right. Oh, that's great. Yeah, and it really opens the mind to all the different aspects that our body is affected. And it's a really amazing when you break it down too. And I've been myself have been really like trying to go more plastic free, which has been a super challenge for me. And also, and I've been really conscious about my water. And those two things alone take a lot of just changes in your life. So why is it, so you talked about kind of like those toxins and all the aspects of how those different pathways can affect us, but what are some of the ways, why is it so important for us to have that green environment in our home when it comes to our health?
So one group of chemicals that I am particularly passionate about, and again, it's not where my journey started. I started off being mostly concerned with carcinogens because I have a
Mm-hmm.
family history of cancer. And, 20 years ago, that's what was mostly being talked about, was carcinogens and their links with cancer. But
Yeah.
what I have become more focused on are hormone disrupting chemicals.
Mm-hmm.
And this is a very broad term for hundreds of different chemicals that have been found to affect our hormone system or endocrine system. They're also called endocrine disrupting chemicals. And they act in the body in a few different ways. They can mimic our natural hormones, making it seem like we have more than we
Mm-hmm.
actually do. They can disrupt the way that our hormones bind. So, you know, you probably talk about this more than going into the details, but the hormones work in our bodies like kind of a lock and key, right? So
Right,
the
exactly.
hormone hits the receptor site and it triggers a downstream effect for just
Mm-hmm.
about every system in our body to do what we need it to do. So
Yep.
hormone disruptors can block the way that that receptor site is built, or block that receptor site so our natural hormone can't bind, and therefore the downstream effect doesn't happen.
Mm-hmm.
Hormone disruptors can also affect the way that our body processes them. For example, our liver is very
Mm-hmm.
important in removing estrogen once it's been done its job from the body. Hormone disruptors
Yep.
can affect that pathway. So they do a fantastic job at interfering with our natural hormones. And because hormones are so small, like they're in parts per billion in the body, I'm not sure where the hypothesis came from, but it makes sense that hormone disruptors can act at very low concentrations as well, because hormones
Right.
are they do their job very well with very small molecules. And so that's what the research has
Mm-hmm.
found, is that hormone disruptors, they don't act like other toxins or toxicants where you need a very high dose. A lot of the research around environmental health started with occupational exposures and
Mm-hmm.
people who are working in factories and
Right.
working in construction with asbestos. That was a big one. Pesticide applicators. And so the thought was that you needed that very high occupational exposure. But
Right.
what the research has been finding over the last few decades now is that hormone disrupting chemicals are actually acting in our bodies at the levels that we're experiencing them on a daily basis in
Mm-hmm.
our everyday lives. And so what does this mean? Well, hormones affect every function in the
Everything.
body. And
Right.
so, a lot of people think of reproductive issues. So, yes, hormone disruptors are tied with infertility, with the developing fetus. They're linked with reproductive system development issues. They're linked with neurological issues. They're linked with
Mm-hmm.
metabolic issues, asthma and allergies. They are linked with so many issues. And some of them are things that we've just kind of brushed off as being normal, I think.
Right. Like, oh, that'll get better, or that's just the way it's going to be, type of a
Yeah.
thing. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Like for me, a big wake up call was in my teens, I had terrible menstrual cycles,
Mm.
like curled up fetal position,
Mm.
vomiting. And it
Wow.
was just, well, that's just how it is. My mom was like that. My grandmother was like that. We've just got bad genes.
Mm-hmm.
And I was also diagnosed with asthma in my 20s. And that was when I discovered naturopathic medicine and realized that these things actually did not need to be life sentences for me.
Right.
And it started to piece things together about how just because health issues are common doesn't mean they're normal. And
Mm.
we're seeing this with so many things like eczema in babies. And menstrual cycles are a big example that I talk
Mm-hmm.
about a lot. So it's really about shifting the way that we define what healthy is. And I think as women in particular, we're kind of expected just to put up with certain things. And I
Right.
want to shift that narrative that we don't have to just put up with these things.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. It's really interesting that when you talk about the aspect of the hormone disruptors being, our hormones are so tiny. And so then when we're looking at the environment in our home, there can be so many things can have this much more toxic load on our body because the hormones, like you said, they do so many, they do everything.
Yeah.
And it's our communication pathway. It's basically like we've given, like, something is causing that communication breakdown. And so sometimes we don't realize that it's our environment, which I think is one of the things that's so powerful about what you do, is that the environment can be having such a huge impact. Our internal environment, of course, the external, we know we can't control necessarily as much, right? But our internal environment, it sounds like we can. So so you talked about some of those different aspects of health, and we'll dive a little bit deeper into those. And so as far as hormones, are there, have you done any research about specific testing that can show, it sounds like there is some data that shows that the hormones can be disrupted. Is there, specific testing that can show how the toxins in our home can affect the hormones, like specific toxins that are more detrimental to the hormonal system?
Yeah, I mean, you can test your body. Like that's how a lot of this research is done. When they get to the human research stage anyways, a lot of it is done on animals as well, because it's very hard it takes a very long time to study this kind of exposure, right?
Yeah.
And so that's why this area of science is picking up at such a rapid pace, because a lot of the human kind of cohort started 10, 20 years ago, and we're just seeing the impact of it now, right?
Seeing the results now.
So you can test your body for certain things. It's not something that a like normal doctor or lab would do on a
like a heavy metals test basis, or something like that.
Yeah, so there are certain things where if you're experiencing symptoms, like heavy metals would be a big one, where certain symptoms would suggest that you should get tested for things like that. There's been some research on things like parabens and phthalates, which are hormone disrupting chemicals that are quite commonly found in our day-to-day.
Yeah.
And the one aspect of those is people have said we don't need to be concerned about them too much because they have a very short half-life in our body. So they know that when they enter our bodies, are able to clear them out quite quickly. But however, when they study and when they test people's concentrations, they're in just about all of us because we don't get a break from exposure.
Yeah. Plus our bodies are toxic, right? So they're not able to help things that would leave the system, like the liver, like you mentioned.
Exactly. And so, I don't send my clients to go get tested to find out if they're high in BPA or phthalates or PCPs or flame retardants or whatever. I don't suggest that level of testing because it's not really needed unless you're presenting with something that could be affected by like you're saying, heavy metals that need a certain detoxification process. But yes, the research is showing links between specific hormone disruptors and specific outcomes, but also it's accumulation of them, right? Like we can't say that, oh, if you're using a shampoo with paraben, you're going to develop breast cancer in 20 years. That's not how it works. Right? So the evidence is just pointing to the onslaught of these hormone disruptors and a myriad of health issues. And so it started with like BPA is a big one.
Yeah.
That got a lot of attention with Nalgene water bottles and baby bottles. And as a result, it got phased out because they found that BPA was slightly estrogenic. And so it was leaching from the plastic into the water or the milk or formula and had the potential to cause issues in the growing baby. And so but they're also finding that a lot of chemicals that we knew were hormone disruptors and could have reproductive or estrogenic activity, for example, we're also seeing this new identification of chemicals called obesogens. So we're seeing that some of these chemicals can actually modify the way that our body processes food and fat and our ability to metabolize them. And so it's not a linear, like this chemical will cause X reaction. It's a general tie to certain toxins and what they're seeing in terms of downstream health effects, which I listed off previously about some of the issues.
Right. Yeah. It's amazing how many different aspects are chemically in just like things that we eat in the containers. Like that was one of the reasons why I decided to really work on eliminating plastic, because I know how it's just for the environment is one aspect, but also, I didn't want to in any aspect affecting my food. And so let's talk about some of the things in the home. What are some of those areas? So you mentioned those kind of like three aspects, and how can someone start investigating what types of things to eliminate, and in a way that can be not overwhelming, which I think you mentioned in the beginning, but how to start taking those first steps?
I like to start with your skincare and cleaning products.
Mm-hmm.
It might not be somebody's biggest exposure,
Right.
but from developing a habit and a lifestyle about this, it's a great place to start because the products you're using up on a regular basis, they're fairly small ticket items.
Mm-hmm.
And with skincare products, I especially like starting with those because they are one of the few products that you use in your home that have to disclose all of the ingredients.
Right.
And so it's a great way to start practicing understanding how labels work and how marketing
Mm-hmm.
works, and
Mm-hmm.
just getting used to being a more conscious consumer, which is a big focus I have also in
Mm-hmm.
empowering people to know what they're using in their homes. You're not going to go non-toxic 100% of the time.
Right.
It's
Yeah.
impossible to create
A
a
little bubble.
toxin-free home. Yeah, exactly. But just being aware of the choices that you're making so that
Mm-hmm.
you are confident that you are doing the best you can with the resources you have and the
Yeah.
situation that you are in.
Mm-hmm.
And so skincare allows you to do that because, with the exception of fragrance, which I can talk about separately, but if in North America, all of the ingredients on a skincare product need to be on the label.
Yeah.
So I recommend comparing kind of the front of the package, which will, if it's a product that is marketing itself as being green or healthy or non-toxic, it will usually have some branding that will suggest that it's
Right. Little
healthy.
little symbols or something.
Yes,
Mm-hmm.
but there are no laws or regulations around non-toxic product marketing. And
Yeah.
so a lot of terms like natural, safe, non-toxic, chemical-free is one that drives me absolutely bonkers because
Yeah.
everything is a chemical.
Right.
Chemicals aren't the bad guy.
Right. Otherwise, we'd be in trouble.
Pretty much, yes. And, green packaging with leaves on it. Like there's a lot
Right.
of different marketing that can be done. And so it's
Yeah.
important, and even free from lists. So,
Mm-hmm.
I mentioned BPA earlier. Parabens and phthalates are big ones that people generally recognize. And so a lot of packaging will say paraben free or phthalate free,
Right.
but you need to compare what's on the front of the package to what's on the back to
Mm-hmm. The
see what's
real ingredients.
actually in it.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So that's where I recommend starting. And because people use a lot more skincare than they think they do often, or
Right. Especially
personal care
women.
products.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that can get overwhelming in and of itself. So I usually recommend starting with the 3 to 5 products that you're using every day
Mm-hmm.
and prioritize the ones that are sitting on your skin.
Yeah.
So deodorant, your makeup, like foundation, stuff that's going
Mm-hmm.
to have more coverage, sunscreen,
Lotions. Yeah. Sunscreen is, that's a
lotion.
huge one for us fair skin
Yes.
individuals.
Yes. So focus on just that kind of small handful first
Mm-hmm.
and get comfortable with those. And then you can kind of build from there. I don't
Right.
suggest that you go in and throw out your entire makeup bag or medicine cabinet of stuff, because then you'll just panic and not know what to do. So I
Right.
like to
Start
do it in a
slow.
strategic way. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. That's really great. And for me, last year in 2020, I focused a lot on that and looking at all of my different products, but I also looked at the packaging, which was for me was super important. And now I've shifted to products that are refillable and are plastic free. And because I know that especially from something that has oil in the product and I'm going to be applying it to my skin, I don't want to be in a plastic container. And then also I want the company to be really conscious of what they're using, the products they're using, the impact it's making in the environment, how it shifted or how it's shipped, all that stuff plays such a role and it does. It was a lot of work, but now that once it's in the role, like what you said, I started slow and I started looking at my toothpaste and what kind of container it comes in, those types of things. And okay, so that's kind of the beauty product realm. And then what about the cleaning products? Because I know, what's interesting about the market of cleaning products is that there's so many when we can just really just use a few. So
Yeah.
how can you help with the cleaning product realm?
Yeah. So cleaning products I like to look at next. And with skincare and personal care and cleaners, the first step is actually to get rid of what you don't need,
Right.
because the
Yeah.
less products you can use, the better. And with those high quality products, they're often more concentrated. So I caution people about comparing price tag to price tag kind of on the grocery store shelf with
Right.
a more natural, less toxic to a conventional product, because often the healthier version will last longer because the ingredients are higher quality, that's not watered down as much. So before you make a very kind of rush judgment on
Right. Like,
price,
this is
know that it's
$30.
not apples to apples.
Right.
But with cleaning products, they don't need to disclose all of the ingredients on the label. So this is changing. California and a couple of states are kind of leading the charge and changing this level of transparency, which is amazing. And to your point of buying products based on packaging and certain things, you know, this kind of lifestyle shift, yes, it absolutely is essential for your own health, but the consumer shifts that we are able to make when we tell businesses and product manufacturers what we want, it's huge. And it
Yeah.
opens the door to clean up the industry so that people who maybe can't make these choices or aren't aware of them right now, they can also benefit, because so much just gets cleaned up in the process of recognizing that people don't want to buy toxic crap anymore.
Right.
And
Yes. That's key.
yes. So with cleaning products, it is a bit trickier because the ingredients don't need to be on the label, but I am finding that on most manufacturer websites, the ingredients will be on there somewhere.
Yeah, right. You can
So
research it a little bit
you
more.
can find it a bit more. The biggest thing with cleaners that I recommend for everyone is to avoid fragrance.
Right.
It's one of the easiest things to look for. It will tell you if the product is going to smell like something. And fragrance, it's not regulated the same way as other ingredients. So you
Yeah.
can see fragrance on the package, and it could be a concoction of any number of hundreds of different ingredients that are used
Synthetics.
in fragrance. And so some of the ingredients are benign, but a lot of them are irritating for folks with respiratory issues. They can exacerbate asthma. There was one study done that showed that children who grew up in homes with more fragranced and more spray cleaning products used were more likely to develop asthma and wheeze by the age of 3. So they're linked with developing these symptoms as well. And some of the ingredients are hormone disruptors. Carcinogens are becoming less common, which is good.
Yeah.
So looking for fragrance disclosure is a big one. And we don't need to have homes that smell like fake flowers. And we need to kind of kick the idea that our homes need to smell to be clean.
Right. Open
And
the window.
usually these scented products are just masking another problem, right?
Right.
So
yeah, deeper problem.
so increasing your fresh air is one of the best things that you can do for your indoor air quality, but getting rid of dryer sheets, fabric softener, those plugins,
Right.
spray air
Oh,
fresheners,
so bad.
like that costs no money to get
Right.
rid of them.
Yeah.
Right.
Exactly. You can save money.
You're saving money. So that's kind of the easiest step to take. And then you can snowball from there to scaling back the products you're using and just looking at the ingredients of the products that you're using with a bit more of a critical eye.
That's great. And you have a resource, I think, or maybe a blog recently about making your own cleaning products. Is that super easy? Can you talk a little bit about that? Because since we're on the subject of cleaning products.
Yeah. I am not a DIYer by just nature. It's not really my jam. However, a friend of mine made me laundry soap actually when my kid was in cloth diapers. And I was very skeptical. So I was like, okay, I'll try your laundry soap, but it has to work. And so I didn't even use it on our clothes first. I was like, it's going to go on the diapers. And it worked. And so
that's great.
I was shocked. So I started making my own cleaners based on that just to see. And I've been doing it ever since. So my son is now 6. So I've been using the same 5 homemade cleaning recipes since then, super basic. and they use ingredients that are really easy to find. That's another important thing for me too. So
Right. Yeah. You don't want to have something you have to go to
yeah,
order online or really far away to have in
yeah.
your cleaning product.
And I usually have, I mean, I'm not perfect either. So I usually have backup
Hmm.
like not conventional, packaged products
Right. In case you've
for
run out
when
or
I
something.
run out
Hmm.
of ingredients, for when I'm super busy, lazy, whatever. And
Yeah.
then I get back on the homemade wagon.
Right. Well, that's great. And
Yeah. So
that
the
is that.
recipes are on my website.
Oh, nice. Great. Super. Yeah. I think it's fun too, to even if you're not, like you said, a big DIYer, it's something easy.
Yes.
Usually the recipes or formulas don't have a lot of ingredients and you can find them and create your own. There's lots of resources for getting like glass bottles, or I recycle mason jars. Those
Yeah.
are a super easy one. And then you're not contributing to the plastic
Yeah.
load of the environment, which is great. Okay. So
Yeah.
you have some awesome guides on your website. Let's shift a little bit and talk about the hormone aspects, because you have a lot of great guides and resources for hormone disruptors, which we were talking about earlier. And if we could talk about the fertility, infertility, and preconception phase, because I think this is a huge part you kind of touched base on earlier. How are the hormone disruptors really impacting? Because, infertility is such a huge aspect of our time right now. And I think, I've been doing a lot of research on my own and interviewing people on some of my podcasts, because people want to know how, what's going on and how they can shift things. So in their home, how can they make an impact, and how is it impacting their fertility specifically?
Yeah. And this is something that I wish somebody had spoken to me about previously, because even though I had already started, there were definitely things I would have done differently
Hmm.
preconception, because uh, I mean, I wasn't aware of how much that can impact the baby in terms of
Right.
how we're setting up our bodies, and for both partners.
Yeah. Yeah.
A lot of
Especially
people
men,
think,
sperm count. Hmm.
yeah, a lot of people think that it's really just a women's health issue, and it
Hmm.
is not by any
No.
stretch. So there are a couple things at play, and why I really like supporting families in the early stages of preconception or the early prenatal months is it not only can improve the parent's health by lowering their toxic load,
Hmm.
but the sooner that we can reduce our body burden of
Hmm.
toxics, the lower the baby's toxic burden will be. So we used to think that the placenta was a catch-all barrier that
Hmm.
stopped everything from
Nope.
getting to the fetus. We now know that that is not the case.
Right.
And, there's research out of both the US and Canada have done fairly small studies, but they've taken the cord blood from newborns,
Hmm.
and each study was fairly consistent in finding toxic chemicals in the cord blood. So we know
Right.
that babies are being born already with a certain level of toxic load.
Hmm.
And human babies are all born premature.
Hmm.
Their systems, they aren't born with developed detoxification or
Right.
immune
They're not
systems.
like, woo, here I am, I'm ready to
Yeah, yeah.
go.
And so they're still developing outside of the womb.
Right. Correct.
So they're they're being exposed to these chemicals with immature systems that are not able to handle them effectively.
Mm-hmm.
And so the sooner that we can lower our load as parents for what
Yeah.
is even in the sperm and egg that will
Mm-hmm.
ultimately form the baby, and right through pregnancy, and I mean, children are developing and growing in ways that we don't see as adults. So it's right
Mm-hmm.
from conception to adolescence. When they hit puberty, they're going through these developmental changes. And with hormone disruptors specifically, this is where, if a developmental window is when certain systems in the body are developing or
Mm-hmm.
certain hormones are starting to level out, if these get interrupted
Mm-hmm.
with hormone disruptors, that's when we can start to see issues down the line. So,
Mm-hmm.
your baby having exposures to flame retardants or phthalates and BPA and plasticizers and all of these things
Hmm.
that could down the line contribute to infertility, for
Right.
example.
Yeah. And other health impacts.
Yeah.
Hmm.
So catching it early, and again, you're not going to be able to birth them in a bubble. So it's not
Right.
about getting rid of everything, but this is where it can be really helpful to prioritize hormone disruptors specifically, because
Mhm.
there's so many different things that you could look at. But when you're preconception and prenatal hormone disruptors, I think have the biggest potential impact for harm, and therefore addressing them has the biggest potential impact for health improvement down the line.
Oh, that's great. And so there you have a guide for that on the website. And is there a specific, what's a good way, like a time frame? When you're thinking about, okay, so we're going to be starting to try having a baby in the next year, when is that time frame that people should really start looking at their home environment, looking at the three pathways that you talked about earlier to really start making that impact?
As soon as you take in the information and are ready to act.
You're like, okay,
Um,
let's go.
yeah. So, medically, there are a lot of people that start supporting preconception patients with other things just to
Right.
prepare them for health. Like they say, kind of 6 months to a year
Hmm.
preconception. Not everybody has that kind of runway, right?
Right. Yeah. Some people are like, well, I'm pregnant. Here we go.
Exactly. So the best time to start is where as soon as you can, whenever
Right.
you're at.
Right
And
now.
one quote that I start all of my presentations with and workshops and stuff is from Maya Angelou, and it's do
Mm.
the best you can until you know better, and when you know better, do better. I think
Right.
one of the biggest things that we can fall into the trap of is learning something and then looking back and thinking, oh my gosh, what have I done? I was doing
Right.
it all wrong, and start to beat yourself up.
Yeah.
That's not helpful,
No.
right? All you can do is take in what you can and move forward based on that information.
Hmm.
And everything that you do from this point forward is making a difference.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Oh, that's great. And so I think that's so key because we do have, especially when it comes to having children, we do have that, like, oh my gosh,
Yeah.
what did I do? Is that what I did? Taking that blame. And we can't control everything in our own environment or especially in the outside world. So that's really key. I I don't know if this is something you have a lot of information about, but as far as hand sanitizers go, we have seen, this massive increase in hand sanitizing. And do you have any resources for making your own hand sanitizer, or is that something that you know a lot about? I mean, I think that's especially the fragrance ones are highly toxic for the system. And I think there's actually been some studies been done on how they're affecting our body.
Yeah. So I don't recommend making your own hand sanitizer, especially if, I mean, we're recording this during the pandemic. So there are
Right.
certain guidelines now that
Yeah,
exist
exactly.
that
Right.
weren't around before. So I recommend washing with soap and water,
Right.
pandemic or not. This virus can be effectively cleaned with regular soap.
That's
You
right.
don't need antibacterial soap either. However, if you don't have access to soap and water, I mean, hand sanitizer is the next best thing. So looking for a alcohol-based, unscented hand
Hmm.
sanitizer with less, like, you don't really need extra ingredients in hand sanitizer.
Right.
Some of them have essential oils as fragrance if
Hmm.
you want something that has a little bit of scent. But I think, there is some give and take given the situation that we're in right
Right. Yeah,
now.
we're in a little bit of a different time period. Mhm.
Yeah. But I think it's important still. Like, I am a bit concerned about raising a generation of germaphobes, which has its
Yeah.
own host of issues, right? So
Right.
is hand sanitizer good for your skin? No,
No.
it
Right.
destroys like your natural
Barrier.
microbiome and your
Yeah.
skin barrier and all of that. However, it's just your hands,
Right.
and
Not your whole body
it's
being
not your whole body. And theoretically, it's, for a lot of us, if you're in the medical profession, you're probably using it a lot more.
right.
Fine, you've got to protect yourself from other things too. But on a daily basis, my kids are using hand sanitizer at school.
Yeah.
It is not something I am choosing to worry about. They need
Right.
to eat,
It's
and I would rather
temporary.
them, yeah, they wash
Yeah.
their hands in the
Mhm.
bathroom with soap and water as much as they can, but, and I have sent them with hand sanitizer, but the pump in the classroom is there and more readily used.
Right.
So that's what they're using. So it's like,
Yeah.
I know that most of the time they are using products that I vet and approve and I'm
Mm.
okay with. At this point in time, at school, they're doing their thing and I'm okay with it. So I
Right.
think, there's a bit of a balance. I don't think we should be totally panicking and freaking out over a relatively short-term use of something that has other benefits. But I don't think we need to have hand sanitizer in our bathrooms at home
Every
and be
room in our
them,
house.
yeah, using them
Yeah.
all the time.
Right. Yeah, I agree. Yeah, the only time I've been really using it is when I'm out in the environment where I can't wash
Yes.
my hands, where if I'm in the store or, I have to get gas and I have to touch the gas pump, like something like that, where I
Yes.
really need to protect myself. And then traveling, that's when I always use it. But yeah, it's interesting. I'm really sensitive myself to fragrances, and this has been at a whole new level for
Yes.
me, like with the environment and going out. And so, yeah, that it's interesting. We'll see. And like you said, it's not something that is permanent. We'll be able to shift out of our massive hand
Hopefully
sanitizer.
soon. Yes.
Yeah, hopefully soon. Okay, so it sounds like it's super easy to make your own products, and shifting out of having your chemical home into a toxic free home can be an easy transition when you start slowly, which is great. And you have some wonderful resources. I'd love for you to kind of talk about some of the things that you have. And so let's talk about your resources for fertility and hormone disruptors. Can you talk a little bit about those?
Yeah, so I've got a download on 4 hormone disruptors to avoid before having a baby. So it's
Mm-hmm.
great for preconception and early prenatal months. And it walks you through a bit of the science and what's been studied about the key hormone disruptors. And then I give you kind of 12 actions across those hormone disruptors that you can take in your home to reduce them.
Oh, great. And then you also have a podcast too. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, I've got a podcast called The Missing Pillar of Health
Mm-hmm.
podcast, and it is a mix of solo shows and interviews covering obviously environmental health topics, toxins, and also tangential health related issues
Mm-hmm.
because I focus on the external environment. So I bring on other like naturopathic doctors, especially, and other experts to talk about the inside the body health. So it's a great, my goal is to bring issues that are not well addressed in the conventional sphere and shed light on it in a practical and influential way.
That's great. And people can find that on your website too.
Yeah, it's available on all the major podcast players.
Awesome. And why did you call it the missing pillar of health?
I have come to believe that toxins are often thought to be this kind of side, nice to have little kind of cousin to other health issues. And
Hmm.
in my mind, they really deserve to be standing in with the other common pillars like
Hmm.
exercise and nutrition and
Hmm.
sleep and stress. Without addressing toxins, honestly, all of the nutrition work, all of the exercise, if your body is overburdened, the
Hmm.
benefits that you get from eating well and exercising and sleeping well are going to be diminished. And so toxins really do need a seat at the table and they need to be talked about more effectively. So that
Mm.
is why I
Yeah.
called it the missing pillar.
Yeah, that's amazing. It's so true, right? If the body is not able to process toxins. I talk to patients all the time about the bucket model, like
Yes.
everything we have going in the bucket, and then that bucket gets overflowed and is, just running on the floor. Nothing that we're going to put in. Your body can't take anything else in the bucket. So we
Yeah.
have to have a spigot for it to open up and then allow the body to release. And some of those pathways, like you talked about earlier with the liver and the brain and the spine and the neuro pathways, those can be really affected. Our gut all
Yeah.
can be affected from toxins. And I think people are just, I don't know, maybe in the last 10 years, are really starting to become much more aware of how toxins are affecting our body, and which is great. And so I'm glad that you're out there providing the information and being such a great resource. And you have some fun programs that you offer too. Can you talk a little bit about the Healthy Home Collective, which I think is super cool?
Yeah, it's my monthly membership where I walk you through month by month, kind of week by week, simple steps that you can take to assess and evaluate your home and
Mm-hmm.
also reduce toxins.
Mm-hmm.
So it's designed to be kind of worked through slowly over time, so it's not overwhelming.
Right. Yeah, that's a good
And
one.
yeah, and so it's all laid out for you month by month. And the collective is a group of individuals going through the same process and
Mm.
myself coaching and supporting you along the way.
Oh, nice. Great. And that's an evergreen, so people can jump in anytime.
Hmm.
Awesome.
Yeah,
And so the collective, is that like a face group type of aspect where people can ask questions and communicate about different toxins and cleaning and all kinds of things?
yeah, there's a Facebook group, and then also I do live video coaching via Zoom.
Mhm.
So
Awesome. Oh, that
mhm,
sounds great. What a great resource, especially in this time when people are a little bit more stressed. The last thing they want to do is to have to take on more stress, right?
totally.
And then you also have another group or program preparing for pregnancy.
Yeah, prepping for pregnancy is a 6-week course that's hyper focused on the strategies and actions to take in your home to give you the biggest kind
Mm.
of bang for your buck when it comes to lowering your toxic load to the toxins that are most directly linked with fetal development and
Mm.
healthy pregnancy. So
Mm-hmm.
it's a designed for preconception in the first 2 trimesters to
Mm-hmm.
really kickstart that healthy home. Again, not doing everything all at once, but focused on the things that are going to get you the best results with less stress.
Yeah. Oh, that's fabulous. That sounds great. What a great resource for moms who are just like overwhelmed in that beginning stage. What I was recently seeing a patient, and she was having a lot of morning sickness. And it was just like everything was just like so impactful, just every little thing, and having all, an aspect to take a little bit of stress off the plate can be so important. So
Yeah.
that's great. I love that. And how can people find you? What's your website?
So you can find me at greenathome.ca. It's a .ca. I'm in Canada, but I serve clients across the US as well. And my podcast, as we mentioned, the Missing Pillar of Health podcast, and I'm on Instagram at Emma_green@home.
Wonderful. Thank you, Emma. It's been so fun to have you on the show. I learned so much, and I can't wait to check out more of your resources. I was checking them out earlier, and you have such great, great things to provide for everyone.
Oh, thank you so much. Thanks for the conversation today.
You're welcome.